listening to episode number 8 of Smash the Bug podcast. Me and Jesse here.
Hey, happy to be here.
It is really great to be with him as we talk about more problems and news. So we always start off talking about news, but before we do that, I always like to make a plug. Please make sure you are subscribed to Smash the Bug on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify. I'm actually getting a little bit faster at saying those. And cannot forget YouTube. We are putting up these episodes on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe. Jesse, are you subscribed to it?
Yes, I am subscribed.
Good.
And it's great. And if you get on YouTube, you can actually see us talking, which is sometimes better, depending on who you are and what you think of us.
Well, I don't know. There's not much to see here, but whatever. Yeah. At least from my perspective, at least with me. But that's all good. Anyways, so Jesse, what is fill us in on some of the e-commerce development news here for this past week.
E-commerce, let's go with Hoova coming up here, meeting on May 19. And that was scheduled here recently, and that'll be great to see what they have in store, what they're talking about. It's so interesting to see what they have going on there, and I'm excited about what's coming up next for Hyva.
Now, I do need to call this out for our native English speaking friends, mostly here in the United States. I guess you might have some in United Kingdom as well. Hyva is spelled Hyva. So I made the mistake until just this past week of calling it Hyva, and like a high five, Hyva, and I was kindly corrected on that. So it's Hyva.
I'm glad you corrected me just before the podcast because I was still making that mistake myself. Like, I know how to pronounce this, and no, that's not so much the case.
And Jesse, what is Hyva?
Hyva is a new theme. It's quite significant. New theme, and there's also an admin aspect of it as well that they're building out for Magento 2. So kind of doing away with some of the Luma boilerplate that comes with Magento 2.
Bye, baby.
Yeah, and trying to take a new approach to it. They're using modern technologies that a lot of developers will be more familiar with. So coming with something that's pretty blank out of the box, you're not going to get some sort of super full-featured in terms of like go into the admin panel, switch a switch, and you get some sort of different color. Right. But you're going to get a point to start with.
This is for developers. It's for developers, not necessarily again plug and play for merchants. But
that's right.
It sounds like it's done right. Like it's a good platform. I mean, we're in 2021 of all times, right? I mean, it's great to have a solid theme. And full disclosure, I have not yet worked with it, but everything I've seen about it looks phenomenal, and I am really excited about an opportunity here, hopefully soon, to be able to build a website on it, which we've kind of talked about on our SwiftOtter.com website as we're working on a rebrand for that. But we're kind of we feel like Magento's CMS capabilities are a little bit maxed, and we certainly have pushed the envelope, and so we might bite the bullet and do WordPress or something along those lines.
Yeah, when it comes to the CMS, like actually managing content, it's a little bit hard to compare the two, at least the open source versions of the two. Yeah. So it's definitely pushing us in the other direction. But speaking of building websites, that's the other thing that's been somewhat new here is bugufo.com. Yeah. Interesting place, kind of like a place where you can pay to get your Stack Overflow questions answered in some ways.
It's a very interesting idea, and I'll be curious to see the traction that it gets. I'm guessing with bigger corporations, people have some cash to throw around. But yeah, basically it sounds like you write up your problem, I assume put some code in there, maybe some type of database, and somebody fixed it. It's kind of like the bounty program for vulnerabilities, but for bugs. This is really cool.
Yeah, it is. I'm curious to see where it goes. Stack Overflow has been that for a long time on some level, and yet without the monetary motivation in it. And so people do it to get their fake internet points to increase.
Well, don't say fake. I mean, it's
fair.
I worked my tail off. I mean, it was a number of years ago, but I worked like crazy to get those points.
Yeah, it almost feels like money sometimes.
There was nothing fake about them.
Yeah, I know. It's not, but it is, right? There's no like real reward that comes there unless you have like an employer that says, oh wow, they've got 5,000. Whatever they're called on Stack Exchange. Reputation.
Reputation, that's right, yes.
This person must know a lot.
Yeah, and I was up to, I think, 5,000. I think I'm up to 5,000 on Stack Overflow, and it's just kind of fun to see that slowly increase over time.
Yeah,
but anyways, that's some cool news. We hope to dig into to Hoova here in the future and to give some real analysis of it. But hey, the people that are working on Hoova are like the rock stars, the icons in the community. So, it's going to be good. If nothing else, I'll throw out the name Vinay Kopp. He's on it, and it's a good platform. So, with all that said, I'd love to jump into some of the conversations. Again, the purpose of this podcast is to help educate as far as the challenges that we come across, the problems. Some of them we're still solving. We are still in the middle of it, but it's relevant. Hopefully, this will be an inspiration to you as you're fighting through a problem here next week. That or in the coming weeks, that you might have heard this story that we share, and it's like a light bulb moment that, wow, this might help me solve a problem as well. So that's our goal in sharing this conversation.
Yeah, it was like something that you and I were talking about just this week about someone who could be interested in learning development, and it's like it's not for everybody, because there's this aspect of like crossing bridges of meeting these challenges and not giving up, like keeping on going. And we kind of want to be a little bit of that for you too. Like, we recognize that no matter if you are junior just starting out or you are senior, been in this for 10 years, like you're still solving problems and you're still like fighting through these challenges that you've got. And hopefully you can relate with us, because that's what we're doing too. And that's what we find exciting to work through those things.
Well, and I find it very interesting, Jesse. So like, I've obviously been working in Magento for 10 or 11 years. That would easily put both of us ultimately into senior developer status. But these challenges, I don't know, that I keep getting thrown on a not quite a daily basis, but certainly a number of times a week. It's stretching, it's pushing me just to sometimes the farthest limit. Let's talk about a couple of those here. But first, I want to share a really quick story. I think you'll find this funny. So my wife and I went to Florida for a few days. I've been taking almost any time off for 3 years or so. So we decided
been way too long.
Yeah. So we took a few day vacation there. It was wonderful. Jesse held down the fort here. He did, as always, a great job. And collecting seashells on the beach, as long as it's not live seashells, we're okay. And we collected a number of the live ones. And so my wife, bless her heart, she was cleaning these seashells up, had them all in this bowl of water to kind of get the sand off. I don't know whether crud or whatever would be on there. And
don't ask questions. That's the safest thing to do.
Well, yeah, thank you. That's good. Yeah. And we noticed one of these seashells is parked on the edge of the bowl. That bowl of water where the rest of the seashells were, and there is this brown body sticking out of it, the head one direction, the tail the other direction, and two antennas sticking out of this thing's head. That creeped me out. I mean, it seriously creeped me out. These are dead seashells. It's illegal to collect live seashells. But there was a slug that was somehow alive in a very dead-looking seashell.
That is just crazy.
It was creepy.
That is crazy.
And doing some investigation, turns out this was an invasive species of snail. So how we collected that, my wife said she knew exactly where she collected it. It was like right on the edge of the path. Of course, that snail spent a night in the freezer. And I think
he's done. He's gone.
Its status is deceased. It was pitched into the garbage in a sealed plastic bag. I don't think there's any chance of that thing getting out. But all that to say, bugs that we get into don't necessarily end in the way that we think they will end. It seems like over and over again we get into a problem. It seems like we have this nailed. This is exactly the problem, but it ultimately kind of sprouts legs and a tail, and it kind of ends up to be something totally different.
Yeah, you're working on something different. I like how you changed from a slug there, talking about that one type of bug.
That's a nice tie-in, yeah.
To the computer side with bug. And I was thinking, well, then you could snail something maybe instead of nailing it.
Oh.
Does that work? Are we allowed to do puns here?
Well, we do lots of puns.
You snailed it.
Nice, that's good. So the thing I wanted to tell you about is creative solutions to difficult problems. A quick story here. in one of these projects that we've been working on, we have a status calculator. Basically, the status is calculated from these different entities, and the status is then entered into the database. Well, the nice thing is we have it's basically, I think 3 columns in this table. We have obviously the primary key, we have this new status, and we have the created at. So the status is not overwritten, it's added to, it's a place in time. Now that works great until you have to go build a grid in the admin panel to filter by status. How are you going to make this join that has a sub-select in there? How are you going to make this join that is filterable? Jesse, what do you think about that?
Yeah, that's pretty tricky, and I'm not too strong on databases myself.
You're a front-end guy.
Yeah, I like to steer clear as much as I can. But that's one of those things where I just start scratching my head being like, can I phone a friend?
Yeah. Well, that is a legit solution too. It does work well as long as you come armed with the problem, right? It's the issue comes when you that's the first thing you say is like, I don't know how I'm supposed to do this, and phone the friend is the very first thing you do, and that's not a good solution.
Yes, that's for sure.
Well, I was kind of putting that problem off because that was one of those things that I've actually had to deal with it in the past on another project. I don't remember how I solved it there. But as I got thinking, and I don't remember what the inspiration was, but it clicked with me. Isn't a subselect basically the equivalent of a view in MySQL? Ultimately, Magento uses views for the legacy catalog inventory status tables. Well, can't we just create a view to select the latest status for each one of these entities? Yeah, we can do that. That was the solution to this problem. Then we could join it in just like normal, and the problem is solved. We can now filter by status, and status again is a mini records, but we have one point in time that basically the latest status now that is filterable in this grid. So
that's such a cool solution, and bring me up to speed on exactly what a view is here. It sounds like you almost have a select that's run maybe every time the database is updated or something like that. So you basically have a table that is reflecting the data in other tables.
It's basically the same as a table, yeah, but it's not actually a table with X number of columns that are specifically defined. It's the result of a query. It's a view of a table or a view of a query. And I'm not sure exactly how often it's updated, or I am not very deep at that level of it. But basically it's a more, I guess here's a way to look at it, a saved select. That's literally what it is. You could put a joins in there and whatever you want in grouping. It's a saved select.
Yeah, and I like how you thought outside of the box. Like typically in Magento, one would think of a certain set of tools for that. Exactly.
Boy, indexers. No good.
Something like that. But in this case, we're like, what else? What other options are there to solve this? Maybe even ones that Magento doesn't use very much. And in this case, they do use it.
Not very much though still.
In that particular instance, I think only maybe one other time, in one other place that Magento Core uses it.
Yeah, so that was my interesting challenge this week, and I have to admit I was pretty pleased with the results from that. It solved all our problems, and it made it work quite well.
It was one of those things where you start with debugging, right? You've got like this problem that you need to solve, and then you go to architecting. You get to build something as a solution to it. You're not just plugging a hole, but you're actually building something on top of that. Yeah. And in my case, there was something that happened over this last week that was definitely plugging the hole. And it was one of those things that was actually not even related to code. Interestingly enough, I guess DocBlock's our code, but it was like not actually PHP.
I would argue it's code.
Yeah. So it was in there, and the API was exploding. This particular URL, anyways, that we were hitting was just not working, and the errors were basically useless. Fortunately, I recognized them as indicating that there was probably something with the DocBlock. Like I figured that was likely the issue. And just to explain briefly here, but Magento uses DocBlock's in formulating API responses and interpolating requests that come in to the API. So it kind of handles it as like almost a little bit contractually, like, okay, this method is going to return this information in the Magento REST API. And so those doc blocks are a very important part, but there is, when they break or when you put something incorrect in there, and in this case I did, there's nothing that like points, oh, hey, this particular doc block is not working quite right. It's like, there was an error processing the request. And I was like, okay, how do I fix this? So started back through the different options that I had, and this started showing up. I believe it was primarily on production, but it also may have been on the dev staging site.
Was this specifically Swagger, or was this just at any API endpoint?
It was in Swagger that it showed up, that the problem showed up, although I think it probably was affecting that particular endpoint as well. And so was working through those things. One of the things that I attempted to do pretty quickly was improve logging, but without success. The way that the stack trace worked, it didn't allow me to get in there to the point that I needed to and log that information out. Some of the tools that I also used, like I believe it's debug backtrace in PHP, was using way too much memory. Like the objects were way too big and exploded.
And I'll interrupt you there. You have to set one of the arguments on there to the second, the first argument, but there's I think two constants that you can specify in there. One to drop the objects.
And I tried that, but then it made that log irrelevant for me. It made it useless for me. That tool.
Well, there you go.
So I did try to turn down the noise some to take care of the memory problem. So it was like balancing the two. Like, okay, can I use this still with a little less memory? And ultimately,
damned if I do, damned if I don't.
exactly. That's what it was. And ultimately, I didn't go local soon enough. So I look back at that. I spent probably at least an hour working in that environment before I switched local, and it was easy to replicate locally. So I go local, and I basically already had it replicated locally without even trying. So 5 minutes, maybe less, local, and I have the problem replicated, which is, as you know, half the battle sometimes. So I jump in there with Xdebug and am able to get through it, because Xdebug doesn't have those memory limitations. Ultimately, you can go back through the call stack, you can expand those objects and see where it broke down. It allowed me to triangulate the file. I had checked pull requests before, which didn't help me at all because there were so many changes that I was looking through. It was probably 15, 20, and I didn't see it at that point. But with that Xdebug, it allowed me to find the file, and then I saw which one changed, and I was able to recognize it. But I think the biggest takeaway for me was that aspect of not going local soon enough, where I stayed in that staging environment and just trying to hotfix stuff and mess around with things, and it was sitting right there locally for me. I had it the whole time.
That's good, and it's tough. It's painful. I don't know what it is about these doc blocks. I fixed an issue this week, and the return parameter class name had a tab in the middle of it, like 4 spaces, and I looked at the commit history. Yep, it was there, and it's easy to do. You hit the tab key accidentally, and it's there.
You think you're in a different window than you are.
Exactly.
And you hit the tab, and then it doesn't work, and you're like, huh, that's weird. I'm not focused. And you switch back.
Or you do like on command tab, you fat finger, you let off command and hit tab. I mean, there's a million ways that can happen, and it was committed in, and obviously one of us missed it in the review, and that's just how stuff happens. And of course, Swagger breaks or whatever, the API would end up blowing up in that regard. But
yes, and to clarify, Swagger is like automatic docs in Magento for API. So a lot of platforms have them where you don't have to write docs necessarily, and it'll provide you some sort of information about how the API works.
And here's a dirty little secret. There is an Easter egg. Well, it's basically an Easter egg on most every Magento website, unless you have it turned off. Go to that website.com/swagger, and you'll see if the developers were good at, if they were lazy or not considerate or whatever, and actually made sensitive endpoints anonymous access, i.e. you go there without an API key and you can see all those endpoints. So yeah, if you're a developer, make sure you hit that Swagger address just as a final double check before you release stuff out to the wild.
Yeah, that's good. That's one of those things that's so easy to miss.
Yeah.
Especially, think about it, like you could be building an API and like, I don't want to bother with authentication while I build it. So you just drop that anonymous key on there, and then
yes,
you're in trouble.
Yes, and but the thing is, admin authentication or OAuth authentication is not that difficult. Like in our GitHub or GitLab, gitlab.com/SwiftOtter, there we in the I think it's called the associate developer project there, you can click into it and see how to render, how to get an API key for OAuth, like for admin access. So super easy, no reason not to do it. And it is a big security vulnerability if it is exposed as anonymous. The other Easter egg I was going to say is the Magento _version. I always like to hit that when I'm talking to a merchant or something like that, just to see what version they're on. So it's website.com/Magento_version. And it doesn't tell you the minor or the patch version. It just says Magento 2.3, actually Magento Commerce or Magento Open Source 2.3, 2.4. So that's pretty enlightening as well.
Yeah, that is quite the Easter egg.
Yeah, that's good. Anyways, so those were some interesting takeaways there. One other thing I wanted to quickly chat about was indexing, performance improvements there.
Nice. Let's do that. That sounds like a deep dive.
It is. Well, so we don't have a huge amount of time left, but I'll just give a quick overview. We had a merchant that we released. Well, we talked about that in our last episode. They went to
2.4.
241. And we ended up, there was some weird stuff that was happening. I'm not exactly sure where it was. We were working to fix some of those problems. One thing we noticed was that the indexers kept getting gummed up. And in essence, here's a little thing. When a model is saved, if there is what's called MView, and I'm not an absolute professional in MView, but it's a concept borrowed from MySQL that triggers functionality when a row update happens. And Magento kind of has that idea as well. It's with Entity Manager. Entity Manager is kind of a bit of a bloated system. But MView is a part of that. When Magento detects that there is a change made to, for example, product, it registers it in with MView, and it allows, for example, an indexer to come back later and pick that record up to re-index it in the future. That's where that index on schedule comes in. I actually just found out a few days ago where those records were stored. It is stored in tables with a suffix, so the last three characters are _CL. Those tables are what MView looks at to see what needs to be indexed. Long story short, I found a place, and I'm actually not 100% sure its current status, but I found a place that an indexer was actually calling category repository get, the category repository get method, to only load the name of the category. That's all it was doing, loading the name of the category.
And that repository would introduce a lot of overhead there.
To load in a category from the category repository pretty much always takes a second or two. Like it's crazy how much time that takes.
Wow.
The solution, and this is a great suggestion, I think, across the board. It's one of my favorite Magento suggestions. Inside the category resource model, so Magento catalog model, resource model category, there is a method called something like get raw attribute value. You've seen me talking about this all the time, haven't you?
It's great.
Yeah. Basically, you're getting one attribute value for this category. It does not load the entire category in. That combined with caching, literally I sped up that indexer by well over 30%.
That is incredible.
Just by doing that, it's much faster. So anyways, that was a bit of a fun journey this week. It wasn't necessarily what I would choose to go on because it was a crazy deep dive, rebuilding all this locally and all that. It was crazy, but it was very good. So that was another story to share out.
Yeah, that's fantastic though. And I like how you were able to identify those big wins. Honestly, we don't always get to that.
No. And that's the problem with performance optimization is it's usually a ton of 1% wins.
Yeah, and you spend a lot of hours for that. Yes. 1, 2, 5, 10%.
Yes.
But to get 30% with Joe's, I saw that pull request and it wasn't very big. I mean, you didn't do a whole lot of code changes to do that.
Yes.
And that was 33%.
And that was actually something we could always talk about in a future episode. There was some iterative I had already kind of fixed that problem a little bit in the past, but in going back through that code, I found that it was there was a significant amount more I could optimize in that, and so that's where we I can talk about the specific differences later, and so we'll cap it here. But anyways, yeah, this has been wonderful. I love talking about the challenges we face. I love talking about it's less important that I like to talk about it, or like we like to talk about it, than it is that I hope this is an inspiration to you to keep going, keep staying at it, even if it seems like there's no answers. You can find that answer, and just stick with it. And we fight through these problems all day, every day. Absolutely, that is right. Yeah, and actually, I will throw this out. Our Slack community, swiftotter.com/certifications. We love to build it and grow it and ask questions. Come in, ask questions. We are there. We do our best to answer them. Can't answer every single one of them. There's usually more context that's often required. But yeah, it's a great community. It's a thriving community. Great people as part of it. And so I would invite you as well if you have not already joined. I know Jesse, I think you're in there. Absolutely. And feel free to come in, ask questions. We are here to help. We love to help people. So with that, I think we should call it a wrap. Thank you for listening. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here. I hope if this was truly inspirational to take a few minutes and go to wherever your favorite place is, the most convenient place, and leave us a 5-star review. Just a 5-star review. Drop in some comments. How can we make this better? What do you find inspirational? What do you find educational? That's what we want to bring to you here in future upcoming episodes. And make sure you subscribe. We got a ton planned, and I'm super excited about it. Thank you for joining. We will see you next time.